Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Rink-Side with Hits and Clips live stream. So, as you can tell by the description, I'm going to be recapping the 2025 NHL Free Agent Signings that took place over this past week, and there are lots. There are a lot of signings that took place. A lot of players that we are familiar with signed contracts with other teams. Some signed with the same team that they were on. So I'm just going to go through every single NHL team and just break down some of the signings. I won't mention every single one on here, but if you want to see a lot of the free agent signings that took place, you can head to the NHL.com website and head to the NHL Free Agent Tracker, and it will show you all of the teams that signed players, all the players that signed with teams. Yeah, just break down some of these and give my thoughts of what occurred. So let's start off with alphabetical. Anaheim Ducks. Granlund, he signed a three-year contract with the Anaheim Ducks. If you look at overall the Anaheim Ducks, I mean, nothing really has changed with the Anaheim organization. Anaheim and San Jose are two franchises in particular that even Zach and I talked about this on one of our videos. Anaheim and San Jose, they seem to be two franchises in particular that might not be going in the right direction. They have been spending a lot of time rebuilding over the years. Anaheim's taken the step of rebranding their logo, their colors. Maybe you look at maybe it'll be the Anaheim, the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim instead, or the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. Maybe the Los Angeles Ducks. I don't know. I think the Anaheim Ducks have a lot of rebranding to do in terms of like the logo's great. If you look at the Anaheim Ducks logo, the first thing that pops into your mind, or at least it does for me, is the Mighty Ducks Disney Channel movie. That's the one in particular thing that stands out to me. The orange really stands out in their jerseys. In terms of the team overall, they've come very close to landing the first overall pick, especially in the past. If you look at players like Sidney Crosby, who ended up on the Pittsburgh Penguins, just recently Connor Bedard, who ended up on Chicago, Anaheim could have landed, if you think about it, it's pretty crazy to think about. Anaheim could have landed Sidney Crosby and Connor Bedard in the past if they landed the first overall pick, which they didn't. And so, honestly, nothing really stands out to me from what the Anaheim Ducks signed. You have like unrestricted free agents like Justin Bailey, former New York Islander, Robbie Fabry. Dude sounds familiar from a CHL fan. But yeah, nobody really stands out to me, in my opinion, from the Anaheim Ducks. But just an overall, Granlund, he signed a 3-year contract with the team, so we'll see what takes place there. Moving on next to the second team, team number 2 out of 32, is the Boston Bruins. Now, the Boston Bruins, they made it kind of seemed like the Boston Bruins were going to step back a little bit and they were going to maybe regroup, maybe just take a time, a little bit to just work around their team a little bit and maybe rebuild. I think that's what the Boston Bruins were kind of leaning on towards a little bit going into when they released Brad Marchand. He signed with the Florida Panthers just recently. We'll get to the Florida Panthers in a minute, but Brad Marchand, he just signed, I think it was like a 7-year deal or something with the Florida Panthers. So don't expect Boston to be getting Brad Marchand back anytime soon. Just looking back at the free agents that they signed, though, Janot, he signed a 5-year contract with the Bruins. Not really anybody else that stands out. A lot of minor guys. Maybe a lot of these guys came from the American Hockey League. Some unrestricted free agents. Moving down the list here, the Buffalo Sabres. Now, I think Buffalo might be a team that you might want to look out for in the future, in terms of a playoff contention team, pretty much. Buffalo, McLeod, he signed a 4-year contract with the Sabres. Connor Timmins, he just resigned, as well. But yeah, again, nobody really sticks out to me. The only guy that really sticks out to me is Ty Tullio. Now he's a former Oshawa General, so obviously that name is familiar to me. But yeah, he's an unrestricted free agent, but they did not receive the qualifying offer for someone like Tyler Tullio. So yeah, Calgary. We're moving on to Calgary now. I got a few things to say about Calgary as an Edmonton fan. Calgary is interesting. I think Calgary, they were so close. Like they were Calgary's on the right path. If I'm being honest as an Edmonton Oilers fan, just a hockey fan in general, I think the Calgary Flames are heading in the right direction. I don't know if they're heading in the right direction for coaching wise. Calgary might want to look at someone like a new coach. That might be their first step they might want to take going forward. If you're the Calgary Flames, you really got to look at your goaltending situation. Dustin Wolf, he just, he's the guy that's holding the fort down for the Flames, where Dan Vladar, he just signed with the Philadelphia Flyers. So you're not going to be getting Dan Vladar back anytime soon, which means you're going to have to be looking for a backup goalie if you're Calgary. And so with players like Morgan Frost, he just signed with Calgary. So if you're Calgary, you got to really look towards in the future and think like, okay, what is your next step here? Because if it wasn't for teams like Vancouver, Utah, and I think even Anaheim was not too far even below them either, but teams like that, they're going to be making the same push as same as Calgary, what Calgary is looking to do as well. So again, I think what Calgary really needs to focus on is building for their future, not just building for the now, but building for the future. And so some of the unrestricted free agents for Calgary, Tyson Barrie, he's obviously a former Edmonton Oiler. Anthony Mantha, now he just signed with Pittsburgh. So that's going to be interesting. And as mentioned before, Dan Vladar, former goaltender for the Calgary Flames, he just signed with the Philadelphia Flyers. So if you are looking for someone in the future who's you're looking for a good goaltender. You want to, lock down your defense. You want to lock down your offense. You want to lock down. You want to hold the fort as much as possible, especially if you're a team like Calgary. Let's move on to Carolina. Carolina, this just seems to be like an ongoing occurring trend for the Carolina Hurricanes. They are a team that is always, every single year, always going to reach that climax and making it to the second round, maybe even the Eastern Conference Finals if you're Carolina. We saw what Carolina was capable of this past playoffs. They just ran into a good Florida Panthers team once again. And you think about it, if it wasn't a blowout for the Leafs and it was a closer game overall, you're looking at pretty much a Toronto Edmonton Stanley Cup final, but that just didn't occur because, why have a Canadian team win when you can have Canadian players win on American teams, right? But yeah, it's going to be an interesting offseason for the Carolina Hurricanes. Caden Primo, he is the former goaltender of the Montreal Canadiens. He just signed with Carolina. I think he's going to make a remarkable impression with the Carolina Hurricanes. Not to mention Ryan Suzuki, former. Let me see here. He's a former OHLer, and I believe he played for the Owen Sound Attack because his other brother, Nick Suzuki, played for Montreal. He played for the Guelph Storm, and I actually saw Mr. Suzuki play when I was at a Barrie Colts game. So that was pretty cool. See some future upcoming stars playing in the junior league, and then they go on to play in the NHL. So pretty cool to see what some of these teams are capable of bringing to their organizations. I think Carolina, they're going to be in the same spot I think they are going to be in the past years they've been in, but I don't think Carolina is going to be that. I don't know. Maybe Florida I don't know. There's talks about the Florida Panthers going as three-peats, where they're going to be repeating the Stanley Cup back to back to back. If I'm being completely honest, maybe Carolina is that team that knocks them out next year. If Carolina and Florida end up meeting in the Eastern Conference Finals once again next season, so we're going to have to see what takes place. Chicago Blackhawks. Now, I heard this thing going around, and this would be very dumb of the Leafs to do this, but they landed a very talented player of the London Knights in Easton Cowan, and he may not be the level star of what Mitch Marner and Nylander and Matthews. They're not. He's not at that level yet, but if you're Easton Cowan, you gotta think that you're going to be at that contention level in the years to come. And so I saw this. This was I can't believe this was even trending, but they were talking about East trading Easton Cowan. I'm like, you gotta be. It's one thing to be the typical Toronto Leafs as they typically are, but to think that, oh, like, there's probably someone else better out there. No, there's not any other better junior hockey league players that built their career better than Easton Cowan. But just to recap a little bit of the Chicago Blackhawks, they didn't really sign too many big stars. You're working around Connor Bedard a little bit to build the offense and defense and goaltending. We saw that former captain Chicago Blackhawk Jonathan Toews just went back to his home team, and he's just signed a one-year contract with the Winnipeg Jets. So that you won't be seeing Jonathan Toews anytime soon in a Chicago Blackhawks uniform. But yeah, nothing really big has gone on for the Chicago Blackhawks, in my opinion. You just got to look for the future. You got to build towards the future and just see what you can, you know, make out of it. Like, you see these unrestricted free agents for Chicago, and you got like Pat Maroon, Alec Martinez. They've all retired. Brett Seney, he just signed with the Rockford Ice Hogs. And so, they're signing contracts with AHL level teams. They're bringing team players up from the AHL level to compete in the NHL. Now, Zach was mentioning this to me about, and I didn't even know this before, but apparently, if you're playing in, say, the CHL, you're playing in the OHL, the WHL, the QMJHL, you get drafted by an NHL team. Let's use Carter George, goaltender for the Owen Sound Attack, for example. So he got drafted by the Los Angeles Kings. He played preseason for LA, and then he got sent back down to Owen Sound. And the reason why he couldn't play with the Ontario Reign, the AHL team for the Kings, is because of the NHLPA, and the reason why is because of the regulation rules within the PA and within the NHL is you can't play in the affiliate league. You have to go back down to your junior team, and so I found that pretty interesting. So Zach and I are going to be covering more about that in the future, especially going into next season, and it'll be interesting. So yeah, let's move on now to the Colorado Avalanche. Now, this is a team I was rooting for since day one in the first round versus, I think it was Winnipeg, no, Dallas. They're playing Dallas, and Dallas or Minnesota, one or the other. They're an interesting team. They Colorado, in my opinion, Colorado kind of falls under the same category of Carolina. They can always reach the level of the playoffs, but they can never reach their level of what they intend to be. And so, speaking of the Carolina Hurricanes, yeah, Brent Burns, former San Jose Shark and Carolina Hurricanes, he just signed um, one-year contract with Colorado, and yeah, again, nothing really big sticks out to me except that former Montreal Canadian and former Colorado Avalanche Jonathan Drouin, he just signed with the New York Islanders. Tucker Pullman, he just signed with Washington. So there's Chris Wagner, he signed with Springfield of AHL. So I think he's even a former Anaheim Duck and Boston Bruin. But you think about Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota of the West, and then Carolina, Washington, Toronto of the East, and I'll even throw Winnipeg in the West too. Those are teams that really seem to get far when they reach the climax of, you know, "Oh, yes, we clinched the top of the conference. We clinched the top of the league. That was our overall goal." Okay, maybe that was your overall goal, but was your overall goal to reach the top of the league or the playoffs? And I think that's kind of what we've been seeing in the past couple years from teams like Winnipeg and Washington, Colorado, Carolina, etc. So I think Colorado has they've built a great team. You know, they're working around Nathan McKinnon. I was kind of sad to see that Chris Drieger he left to go to Seattle when the Kraken came into the NHL. I was kind of sad to see that happen, but you know, you got to work around your team. You got to work around the minor guys that you have in your affiliate leagues, and just see what you're capable of bringing to your organization. Columbus Blue Jackets. So the Blue Jackets are a team that they've been on a journey, and when I say they've been on a journey, they've been through a rough journey. They lost Johnny Gaudreau, and so they kind of had to work around those missing pieces. James Van Riemsdyk, someone there's an unrestricted free agent for under the Columbus Blue Jackets. So he signed with the Detroit Red Wings. James Van Riemsdyk, man, he's been all over the league. I mean, I remember when he was just a minor guy with the Leafs. Justin Danforth, I mean, he signed with Buffalo. But in terms of the players, nothing really stands out to me for Columbus's end. I think two players, or a player in particular that they lost in a big trade, was losing Bobrovsky to the Florida Panthers. Ever since Bobrovsky left Columbus and he went to Florida, like, he's just been leading that group, and I think it's kinda hard to say if a certain player was on that certain team before, what would he be capable of bringing to this team now? Say, for example, Bobrovsky, what was he able to bring to Columbus if he didn't win back-to-back Stanley Cups with Florida? Moving on, Dallas. Now, Dallas is a team I've been following a lot because we have our former Uxbridge local Mason Marshman. Now he just signed with the Seattle Kraken, and when he left Dallas, I was just like, "No, man! Like I don't want to be. I don't want to be watching these Dallas Stars anymore." Dallas was a team I was following a lot. I was rooting for in the playoffs. They ran into a good Colorado team as well. But when Mason Marshman left Dallas and he moved on to Seattle, someone in particular that I was interested in seeing moving forward was Matt Duchene, and we all know that Matt Duchene has spent a majority of his career with Columbus and Nashville and now Dallas. And I was curious to know whether or not someone like Duchene was going to stick around with Dallas or not. But Colin Blackwell, he just re-signed with Dallas, and I think he's going to make a huge impression with Dallas. And with someone that you're looking at, my favorite goaltender for Dallas is Ottinger. He is a phenomenal goaltender, and I just love watching Ottinger time and time again, not just in the season, but in the playoffs too. And so I think someone like Ottinger, Matt Duchene, you may have lost Mason Marshman, but you did gain like a lot of, Cody Ceci. He spent obviously his time with the Edmonton Oilers as well, and now he's just signed with the Los Angeles Kings. So it's going to be good for him. I'm glad to see even him moving on to another team, see what he can bring to the group. Mikhail Granlund, he's just signed with Anaheim, so it's just a shame that Dallas has lost him too. I think teams like Dallas, like I said before, Dallas, Colorado, Minnesota, Carolina, Winnipeg, they're all kind of following in the same footsteps. You kind of want to reach the climax of, oh, you want to be seen by the rest of the league at the top of the standings. But then when it comes playoff time, are you able to bring that same effort and that same capacity to your team to reach playoffs and knock out good teams? If you're Dallas, say you're knocking out good teams like Colorado, Winnipeg. Maybe it's Nashville's time to shine in a couple years. I'm hoping they'll do so, but we'll have to see what happens. Detroit. Now, Detroit is a good team in the past. The Detroit Red Wings, they seem to hold on to a lot of their past history. They had Zetterberg. Remember Zetterberg? Any Detroit Red Wing fans, you would probably remember Zetterberg. He was just one of those offensive players that was just, lighting up the lamp time and time again. Jimmy Howard, he was such a phenomenal goaltender as well for the Detroit Red Wings. And now you just see now going into the offseason what Detroit has been able to build. And you just added James Van Riemsdyk to a 1-year contract. And you just got to look at all the teams that have, like, I was watching a lot of the NHL free agent signings, and it was interesting to see how many players Detroit was letting go and how many team players they were bringing onto the team. Jeff Petrie, former Montreal Canadian, now he just signed with the Florida Panthers. Out of all teams, I still can't believe that. And there was obviously other players that, in particular, I really thought that they were going to stick around on Detroit. My favorite goaltender all time, he made his rounds throughout the NHL, but my favorite goaltender that made his debut in Detroit. Anybody familiar with James Reimer? James Reimer, one of my favorite goaltenders. He is someone that started off with the Marlies in the AHL. He moved up to the Leafs. Then he got traded. Oh man, where did he go? I think he got traded to Detroit right after Toronto. And then he made his Western trip. He made his time in San Jose and Anaheim, and now I think he's in Buffalo. I was looking, and he's still in Buffalo, and I really don't want to see James Reimer retire, but man, he's all time one of my favorite goaltenders by far. If you're the Detroit Red Wings, you got to have some hope. You're not. I don't think they're playoff contention ready. Like my Montreal Canadiens, so they're a great team, and I was looking at some of the players that were, on Montreal, and now they're not. A lot of the players that were minor and they're playing in the AHL, and then they got brought up. Now they're actually making their debuts on other teams, and Montreal is building for the future. Like, man, we'll get to Montreal in a sec, but man, I've been really impressed with what even Detroit has been able to bring onto their group. And I think if you're Detroit or you're Nashville or you're Columbus or even you're Anaheim, I think you gotta be quite, happy with where you're at. You may not be the most, playoff contention team that everyone knows about. If you keep building your team, you're going to be replacing all those other teams that are on good runs right now, like Tampa Bay or Carolina or I don't know, Montreal. I really hope it's not Montreal, but anyways, yeah, I think Detroit's in for a good run for what they have to bring to their group. Man, what do I say about Edmonton here? Because they're like my second favorite team here in the league. They're my second favorite NHL team, and I'm just looking at all the players that they got rid of, all the players that they brought onto their group, and I'm just thinking, like, man, they had so much talent going into these past 2 years with the Edmonton Oilers, and you made two playoff consecutive runs with the Florida Panthers. I honestly thought that the Los Angeles Kings were really going to replace the Edmonton Oilers in the playoffs for the second round this year. I really thought they were. But Evan Bouchard, surprisingly, someone like Evan Bouchard, he's someone I really thought he wasn't going to stay on the team. Even same with Darnell Nurse. I'm a little bit surprised Darnell Nurse is still on the team, in my opinion. But Evan Bouchard, he just signed a 4-year contract. I really didn't think Edmonton was going to sign that long. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what this group can bring, what Bouchard can bring to this new group. Former Calgary Flame, Andre Mangiapane, like he just signed a 2-year contract with the Oilers. Now he's playing against his former team, well, he's going to be playing against his former team, but he's playing on his rival team now. Curtis Lazar, he's another guy in particular that I think he's going to make a good impression, signing a 1-year contract with Edmonton too. And then you just look at the free agents, look at how many players are gone from Edmonton now. Connor Brown, he just signed with New Jersey. Connor Carrick, he just signed in Switzerland, overseas. Travis Dermott and John Klingberg, they just signed with the San Jose Sharks. Corey Perry, he just signed with the LA Kings. Derek Ryan and Jeff Skinner, they are still free agents at the moment. So you lost a pretty good amount of players that had 2 consecutive runs with the Oilers. And it's kind of sad to see players like Corey Perry and Connor Brown not on the team anymore. I'm curious to know where Jeff Skinner will go. I saw actually Jeff Skinner play in Buffalo years back. He's a great player. He did play for Carolina too. So I think Jeff Skinner, I'm surprised he's still a free agent, or unrestricted free agent. He's someone I think if the Oilers don't hold on to, he's probably going to be someone that, you know, I don't know who. If you're, I would probably think, if you're Vancouver or Calgary, you might want to take a close look at Jeff Skinner. He's someone you might not want to have on your first or second line, but maybe hold back on the third line. Maybe I don't know. It depends where you put him. And then Oliver Rodriguez, he's another unrestricted free agent. I think he's going to make a great impression too moving forward. Okay, here it is, Stanley Cup champion time. Florida Panthers. Now, the Florida Panthers, obviously, we know that Brad Marchand, he just signed a 6-year contract with the Panthers. Not surprised, and I mean, typical Toronto, thinking they're going to sign Brad Marchand or sign, Rantanen or whoever, but he ends up signing with Florida. I think it would have been pretty silly to see Marchand on Toronto, and I think 99.9 of Toronto fans would have, they would have just like been all over Marchand. They would just, I think it would have been more of a John Tavares leaving New York Islander kind of vibe if he signed with Toronto. But anyways, that's for another story. Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of free agents that the Florida Panthers have signed. Obviously Jeff Petrie being one of them, former Montreal Canadian, former Edmonton Oiler, former Detroit Red Wing. Yeah, so he's someone that's going to be re-signing with the Florida Panthers, and well, someone like Nate Schmidt, who spent a year or two with Winnipeg Jets, he just signed with the Utah Mammoth, and so Nate Schmidt in Utah. Mm, yeah, it doesn't give me a great vibe, but it does give me like, okay, he's gonna put up a dominant force for Utah. Clearly, they have enough to sign him. Yeah, so Nico Sturm, he just signed with Minnesota. And I think the Florida Panthers, do I see the Florida Panthers going back to back to back? No, I don't. I don't see the Florida Panthers going as 3 Stanley Cup champions, 3 times, but I do see someone maybe like the Carolina Hurricanes maybe replacing their spot too. We're gonna have to see where that turns out to, but nevertheless, the Florida Panthers have signed Brad Marchand, and well, the rest is history. Los Angeles Kings. Now they're probably I'd probably say that the Los Angeles Kings are like my first favorite American team. They're my 5th favorite NHL team. So Montreal, Edmonton, Vancouver, New York Islanders, Los Angeles Kings. So Los Angeles, they signed Corey Perry. I mean, it's kind of sad to see Corey Perry go consecutive back-to-back years not winning a Stanley Cup, especially with a Canadian team. But we'll see what he can bring to the Los Angeles Kings. I mean, you have, a lot of good talent on the Kings. I was actually looking quite a bit at the Los Angeles roster after the free agent day finished, and Quinton Byfield, he's one of my favorite players on the Kings, by the way, because he's a former Sudbury Wolf of the OHL. And you've just added Joel Armia. Joel Armia, he's a former Montreal Canadian. He's a former Winnipeg Jet. He's now signing a 2-year contract with the Los Angeles Kings. So Cody Ceci, former Edmonton Oiler, he also signs a 4-year contract with Edmonton. And let's see else who I got here. Tyler Ward, he just re-signed as well with the LA Kings. You gotta keep your young talent in there. Someone that I was actually very surprised that hasn't retired, because I think he's probably at that retirement stage, but someone who's not on the Los Angeles Kings anymore, thank goodness. But he's gone to my 5th favorite NHL team, New York Islanders. So David Rittich, goaltender of the Los Angeles Kings. Now he just signed with the New York Islanders, and I think if you think about it, David Rittich, he's probably not your go-to goalie. If you gave me a list of goaltenders, David Rittich would probably not be on that list. I mean, he's a good goaltender. Like he's probably a guy that I wouldn't want to be re-signing, but I mean, if I'm Los Angeles, I mean, great, you're trading him away. But to be honest, I don't really know what the New York Islanders see in him. He is a good goaltender. Don't get me wrong. David Rittich is a good goalie, but I don't think if I'm the New York Islanders and I just got the first overall NHL draft pick of Matthew Schaefer in the NHL draft, I don't know if I would want to be signing David Rittich as my goaltender, if I'm being honest, but I don't know. We'll see what occurs. We're moving on to the Minnesota Wild now, and Minnesota. I got a Minnesota Wild fan on this channel, and uh, I like Minnesota. They're not my favorite, but I do respect the team. And I think with someone like Kyle Kaprizov on Minnesota, he again, this is a guy that you can work around. You can work around your team with Kyle Kaprizov, right? And so it's sad. You just had Marc-Andre Fleury, one of the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League. He just retired, and you gotta find a replacement for him. So if anyone follows the Minnesota Wild, let me know. Is there a good, solid goaltender that you may not have right now that you're looking to get? Or is there a good goaltender that you can maybe bring up from the Iowa Wild? I don't know. Let me know. If you think that there's a good goaltender sitting in your AHL farm team, you might want to take a chance because if you look at, say, the Pittsburgh Penguins, they had, they went through the Marc-Andre Fleury era. They went through the Tristan Jarry era. There's probably a few other ones I'm missing, but if you're Minnesota, you kind of have to be, on the search for a new goaltender pretty much at this moment. Now that Marc-Andre Fleury is retired, and if you're looking to be playoff contention next year, then yeah, I would get going on that goalie search in your American farm team because you need someone to replace Fleury, and he's that guy who has been able to hold the fort down. All right, my Montreal Canadiens. Let's see here we got here. So the Montreal did make some good moves. I wasn't thrilled that they got rid of someone like Christian Dvorak or Joel Armia or David Savard's retired, but I'm not thrilled that you got rid of them. But you did get certain draft picks back that you're eligible to put forth towards, your future. And so Christian Dvorak, I'm a big fan of him. Obviously, he just signed with the Philadelphia Flyers. Joel Armia, he just signed with the LA Kings. I'm glad to see Armia go into the Kings because I do like that team. But yeah, it's sad to see, players like David Savard retiring. Obviously, he had this big contract with Carey Price, and Carey Price could just not hold up in physical condition anymore, and so I remember when the Seattle Kraken were coming into the NHL and they were going through their expansion draft. They were this close. They were that close to signing Carey Price, and so I was a little bit surprised that the Seattle Kraken didn't move forward with him, but no, even if I'm not a Seattle Kraken fan, I'm glad Seattle did not take care of Price because he was getting towards, he's honestly one of the best goaltenders in the entire world of hockey, along with Marc-Andre Fleury, in my opinion. Two Canadian goaltenders, by the way. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate that Montreal has lost, a lot of players that were part of history. Joel Armia, Christian Dvorak, David Savard, three of those players in particular were part of that Stanley Cup final run with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And they were part of the bubble that really helped bring Montreal to where they were needed to be. And so, I look at other players like Harvey Pinard and Lindstrom, like a lot of these players, they were pretty much on your third, fourth line. They were on the backup. They were playing in the AHL. You were bringing them up from time to time. And now they're not even on the team. And so it's just like, you got to make the best of your experience, especially if you're playing in the National Hockey League. Whether you end up playing on an NHL team or you spend the majority of your career in the AHL, you just got to enjoy it. And I did mention this team before too, the Nashville Predators. Now, the Nashville Predators, they are kind of like that Columbus Blue Jackets, Detroit Red Wing vibe to me. They're building for their future, and I can really see that they're getting so much closer to becoming another playoff contention team. The only thing about Nashville to me is that they just don't have, like, they have the pieces. They have Roman Josi, they have UC Saros, Steven Stamkos, like he just signed as well, or he just joined the team as well. But there wasn't a lot of free agent signings within the Nashville Predators, and that's why there's not a lot to talk about. with the Predators for the free agents. But the only reason why I want to talk about the Nashville Predators is because I find that they are going to be, if not this coming season, the season after. They're definitely going to be on a big playoff run. And, if you are a Detroit Red Wing fan or a Columbus Blue Jacket fan or a Nashville Predator fan, all three teams will be, looking to being in the playoffs eventually. And so there may not be much going on for your team right now, but there's definitely a lot that you're building towards. And even if you didn't pick high in the NHL draft this year, that's okay. You can build around those players. You can make trades here and then. Don't be like the Leafs where they're thinking about trading Easton Cowan because they don't know what to do with their team. But just they got to think smart. Whatever you do, don't be like the Leafs. Don't trade Easton Cowan. But no, like if you're Nashville, like you have a good future. You have you're building within players, and you got Jacob Verana. So you got a good team, and you just gotta focus on the positives and see what comes out of it. New Jersey Devils, they're not my favorite team. They're probably like my oh boy, New Jersey. They're probably like my third least favorite team in the league. But New Jersey, you can see that they've been like they're good. Like you can tell, oh, like the New Jersey Devils, they're gonna make the playoffs here and there. They're gonna be playoff contention. They're going to be, they might clinch the second or third spot in the Metropolitan Division, but you might not reach the best level. Like you might miss the playoffs by an inch, but you're probably not going to, if at least you weren't in Montreal's shoes where you were playing the Washington Capitals in the very first round. Oh, that was an awful round. But I mean, they had some pretty good wins. I'm surprised Montreal got a couple wins out of it, but still, nevertheless, Jake Allen. Now he is a goaltender that has just held down the fort for the New Jersey Devils ever since he came over from Montreal. And he's been one of my favorite goaltenders. Jake Allen, he was obviously a backup to Carey Price before Carey Price was retiring. He had to retire. But Jake Allen, he signed a 5-year contract with New Jersey. It's great. You added him on the team. You're keeping him around at least. And Curtis Lazar, I mean, you lost him. He signed with Edmonton, so that's good, at least for Oiler fans. And, Daniel Sprong, Thomas Tatar. So they signed, with Evie Zug of Switzerland. So like, they're not on the team anymore, but at least you had at least something to build off of in the future. And I mean, you work around that, right? Every team's going to at least have at least one conditional, two, if not three conditional picks in the entire NHL draft. So you're going to get somebody, and that's why you have NHL scouts. It's why you have scouts for any league. Is why you send them out to see who are the best players out there. How do you think that the NHL saw someone like Beckett Seneca of the Anaheim Ducks or Matthew Schaefer of the Erie Otters? Because they sent scouts out, and so that's how you work around them. New York Islanders, my fifth favorite NHL team. Let's do this. David Rittich. Now, like I mentioned, they just signed goaltender David Rittich to a 1-year contract with the Islanders. You got Matthew Schaefer in the first round of the NHL draft. So if you're the New York Islanders, like I don't think you were expecting at all that you were going to be getting Schaefer, especially after having the odds go to either Chicago or San Jose or even Anaheim, Anaheim or whoever it was. But you got to think that if you're the New York Islanders, you have a lot to look forward to. And you've just signed like a whole lot of players that like Simon Holdstrom, you just re-signed him, Travis Mitchell, Maxime. So you got a lot good amount of players that you are looking to adapt to, and you can build around David Rittich as your goaltender. Matthew Schaefer, is he going to be on if you're coming out right of the NHL draft, are you going to be someone that's sticking around for the entirety of the first and second line, or are you putting him on the third line to start off, fourth line? What do you do if you just get drafted? So Yeah, I don't know. I think if what you have to do, if you are the New York Islanders, you weren't expecting to get the first overall draft at any means. But now that you have the first overall draft of Matthew Schaefer, you have David Rich. I mean, in my opinion, I think the goaltending needs to improve in New York. But you had players that were just a really big contributor to the Islanders organization. Matt Martin just retired. Tony D'Angelo, he just resigned. So at least you got somebody else in your back pocket that you can work with. To me, the New York Islanders have always been playoff contention, except they can just never get over that hump. I mean, at least you have someone like Matthew Schaefer. Maybe I'm not saying that the New York Islanders will do this. Like, by all means, I don't think they would ever do this. If you have Anthony Beauvillier, for example, you got to look at, okay, what is his contract? Is his contract coming up? Is he the player that he used to be, right? Or is he getting to his age where he might end up retiring? Okay, maybe you send maybe a guy like Anthony Beauvillier to the Leafs. You pick up Easton Cowan, and then you got two really high CHL stars on your roster in Matthew Schaefer and Easton Cowan. So maybe that's something you might want to consider. I'm not saying it would be Anthony Beauvillier, but maybe it's someone that you might want to look for in your back pocket so you can potentially trade and try and get a small star like Easton Cowan, especially if for whatever reason the Leafs are looking to trade him. Big mistake if they ever did that. It's why I'm not a Leafs fan because I know they make mistakes every year. Let's move on to the New York Rangers, and yeah, you signed Gabrikov. You just signed him to a 7-year contract, so at least you got some good talents there. You got Panarin. Panarin's still on your team as well, so you have pieces like that. You have players that have been free agents, and they've just signed with other teams like Nicholas Obknubel. He just signed with Minnesota Wild. Cal DeHaan, Luz Domingue, Ben Harper, Riley Nash, like all these players, they are unrestricted free agents. If you're the New York Rangers, you have to make sure you're building around your team, especially if you have good goaltending. Like your good goaltending is going to hold the fort. You're building around Igor Shesterkin, and you want to have as much depth, as much talent as possible so you can build around Shesterkin because he is someone that I think he signed like this crazy contract of like something about $1 million, over a million, something to like $10 million for like, and he rejected it. I don't even know who would reject a contract like that. But there's players like that. There's goaltenders like that. Ottawa Senators. Now this is another Canadian team like Calgary, who I think if it wasn't Montreal, I think we probably could have saw. If I'm the Ottawa Senators organization, I'm really looking to your future. For one thing, like you're looking back at all of the things that you did right and all the things that you did wrong in the first round of the playoffs versus the Leafs. And so Nick Cousins, you just signed a 1-year contract with him. At least keep him around a little bit so no other teams can take him off the market, right? Lars Eller, he just signed a 1-year contract with the Ottawa Senators as well. So at least you have someone else that you can build around. But look, you lost Anton Forsberg to the LA Kings. Man, I mean, look at all the players that have been coming to the Los Angeles Kings organization. Anton Forsberg, who just left Ottawa, and now the LA Kings, they grabbed him. Jeremy Davis, he signs with the Vegas Golden Knights. Adam Gaudette, he signed with San Jose. Dennis Gilbert, he signed with Philadelphia. Travis Hamonic, Matthew Highmore, they signed with the Islanders. Hayden Hodgson, he just resigned. So you lost a lot of talent if you're the Ottawa Senators, and I'm not thrilled that you lost Forsberg or Gaudette or Gilbert or Hamonic or Highmore. I'm not thrilled that you lost any of those guys because if they were a big part of your playoff run versus the Leafs, then I mean, what do you have really? I mean, you can't just work around the Kachuk brother. I mean, you gotta have something else that's gonna build around this and just see what you can do. Other than that, I think the Ottawa Senators, they're somewhat in a rebuild, but they're kind of like, okay, are we rebuilding? But we don't want to be rebuilding for too long. We got to make the playoffs, but we also know we need good players to match teams like the Leafs or Carolina or Washington or whoever you end up meeting in the playoffs. And then Philadelphia. So we know that Philadelphia has signed a lot of players that off some pretty good teams. And, one of those players in particular was Dan Vladar, the backup goaltender for the Calgary Flames. And he just signed a 2-year contract with the Philadelphia Flyers. So if I'm Calgary now, I'm like, okay, who am I using as my backup goaltender? Because Dustin Wolf can't just hold down the fort. He's gone to Philadelphia. Christian Dvorak has signed a 1-year contract with Philadelphia. Jules and Gilbert, they've all signed 1-year contracts with Flyers as well. You didn't really lose too much in the free agency. Like, you did lose Ben Gleason to Minnesota or Cal Peterson to Minnesota as well. But, you gotta think, like, are the Philadelphia Flyers kinda in the same page here with the Nashville Predators or the Detroit Red Wings? Are those teams kind of, fighting for, "Okay, we're kind of on the same page here, we're playoff contention next year, but we're kinda stealing players off of teams that have already had their playoff runs." So, I think teams like Nashville, Philadelphia, Columbus, Detroit. I think those are teams that you're gonna really wanna watch out for next year. They're gonna be very different compared to what they've been in previous years, but they're not gonna be someone like they were year and year after where, "Oh, we're just gonna sit back and rebuild for the next 5 years." No, you're gonna wanna you're gonna wanna at least make the playoffs once in the next 5 years if you're someone like Philadelphia. Pittsburgh is interesting. You have a lot of players like Anthony Mantha, who just signed 1-year contract with the Penguins, Harvey Pinard, who just came over from Montreal. For example, Tyler, Gauthier, so he just signed, with the Penguins of the AHL, and so P.O. Joseph, he just signed with Vancouver. Philip Tomasino, he just resigned, so at least you got him back. You're gonna probably have, if it's not this year, you're gonna have, one more year after this coming season with someone like Evander Malkin. I think if you're Pittsburgh, you had a good playoff run, especially with other teams like Chicago. But if you're Pittsburgh, I think you kind of have to, you know, take a breather, like not push yourself where you're on the brink of, you put all of your energy out at the very beginning of the season and then you're gassed at the end of the year. So, and then you have like nothing to rebuild on. So, yeah, I don't think that the Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be a playoff contention team as teams like Nashville, Detroit, and Philadelphia go into playoff contention mode. But I think Pittsburgh is a team that, you can kind of see that they're kind of getting to the end of their prime a little bit, but they're kind of in the same boat as they were with Detroit for the past number of years and or over a decade where they were holding on to their past. And I think Pittsburgh is kind of in that same boat where they're hanging on to players like Malkin and Crosby and Letang. And so, you just had when Marc-Andre Fleury, when he signed with Vegas when they came into the league, you lost him. And then you had Tristan Jarry, you lost him as well. So, you kind of have to work around these teams. You got to work around these players, and you got to think, okay, what is our goal for the overall season? Are we intended to make the playoffs, or are we expected to be below certain teams this coming season? Because if you're under teams like Montreal, Ottawa, Columbus, Philadelphia, Detroit, if you're under a lot of those teams and you're just hanging around with teams at the bottom like Boston, you're probably, it's probably a sign that you need to step back. I'm not saying that you let go of Crosby, but maybe you have to move away from someone like Malkin, and you just have to, you don't want to be that team that's going to be hanging on for centuries and just hanging on to your past because that's not going to look good in your future runs. I think the Pittsburgh Penguins are definitely in rebuild mode. You can definitely see it in players like Malkin and Letang. Crosby, I was talking to Zach a little while ago, and he thinks that Crosby might be, if this isn't in last season, he's probably going to reach, the next season after that to maybe retire. But 100%, they are definitely sellers at the deadline, and I think if Malkin and Letang are going to be contenders, then you're definitely going to want to pile up those picks if you're looking to trade. trade them, then what are you getting in return pretty much? So, yeah, I 100% agree. Pittsburgh is definitely in rebuilding, and you can definitely see it after what they went through this past season and some of the players that they're still hanging on to in the past. So, again, Pittsburgh gives me Detroit vibes. They're hanging on to their past and maybe a little bit of an Anaheim vibe is a little bit too. San Jose. Now, San Jose is a team, like I mentioned, they're kind of hanging on a little bit with Philadelphia, Nashville, Detroit. They're picking up a bit. I think we expected a little bit more out of San Jose this past season, if I'm being honest. But I knew they weren't playoff ready. Like I knew they weren't going to be in the playoffs at all, by all means. I didn't think they were going to be as bad as they were, but I mean, it's San Jose for you. Like, what do you expect? Like, they're the San Jose Sharks they're the bottom of the league pretty much. I'm a little bit surprised that Chicago didn't have a full run as well. Chicago and San Jose are two teams in particular that most likely are not going to make the playoffs next year, 100%. But if you're San Jose, like look at the teams players that they just signed contracts with. Like Klingberg, he just signed a 1-year contract. Adam Gaudette, 2 years. Alexander Georgiev. Now he was a pretty good goaltender. I really liked him. But he just signed with Vancouver. So yeah, there's not a lot going on here for San Jose, and there wasn't a whole lot going on for them during the NHL free agency. Day, but I think there's a lot that the San Jose Sharks can be hopeful about. I mean, again, you're not going into this NHL season with, "Oh, yeah, we're clinching the top of the Pacific Division." No. Like, realistically, you're gonna probably be in the same position as you are next year. I mean, you had the first overall pick last year in Celebrini, so you gotta think you gotta work around a player like that. What is your goaltending issue? Because if you just lost Georgiev to Vancouver and I mean, does San Jose even have good goaltending? I don't like. I know they had James Reimer, but they let him go to Anaheim. They let him go to Buffalo. So I don't know. Does San Jose actually have any good goaltending? Because last time I checked, they were not good. But yeah, I think San Jose is kind of in a we're not ready there kinda mode. Seattle Kraken. Now the Seattle Kraken, they did sign Lindgren to a 4-year contract, and they did sign Matt Murray, former goaltender of the Toronto Maple Leafs and Pittsburgh Penguins, to a 1-year contract. So Matt Murray, he's kind of is he overrated? Is Matt Murray overrated? Because he was definitely overrated when he went to Toronto, and now I find he's like really, really overrated. I don't know what Seattle like. It's good that they only signed him to a 1-year contract, but still, I don't know if that's the guy you wanted to be signing, to be honest. Like, I just find that there's better goaltenders that you probably could have found out there who's not going to be retiring like next season, right? I mean, you want the best for him, you want the best, but look at a team like Seattle. You just brought on Mason Marchment, and you have someone in your back pocket like Shane Wright. You have your goaltender Chris Drieger from that you brought over from Colorado, and so I don't know. I just really don't know about the Seattle Kraken signing. I've never been a fan of Matt Murray. Like, obviously, when he was good and he was in his prime with Pittsburgh, like, oh yeah, he was with the Marc-Andre Fleury vibe, era. But I just don't know about this. Like, Matt Murray, 1-year contract. I mean, good. It's only 1 year, but still, if I'm Seattle, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. But anyways, aside from that, you didn't really gain a lot. Riker Evans, he is a restricted free agent, so he didn't really go anywhere. There wasn't a whole lot that Seattle got back in return, a whole lot of draft picks. That's pretty much it. But I don't know, man. That Matt Murray one kind of bugs me a bit. St. Louis Blues. So Bukestad. See, he just signed 2 years, a 2-year contract with the Blues. I think that's good. Bukestad is staying around with St. Louis. I don't know about the Blues too much about what their future looks like. I mean, they did win a Stanley Cup not too long ago, but I don't know. Does St. Louis St. Louis didn't even make the playoffs this year, did they? No. So that's another team, like, they kinda fell under Utah, like, they were close, but they weren't there. They were close to they were kind of in the Utah, Calgary, Vancouver, Anaheim section of the standings. They weren't that good. Like, they were good, but they weren't, they weren't, "Oh, we're taking the 2nd wild card spot," good to me. There wasn't really anyone that, again, aside from him, St. Louis didn't really do much in the free agent signing, but we'll have to see what comes about it. Tampa Bay, they are someone I don't really see. I think Tampa Bay also might be kind of in a rebuilding mode coming up soon too. They lost Angelo, they lost Cam Atkinson, Logan Brown. They all lost them to Los Angeles. They signed with the Kings. Luke Glendering, he signed with the Laval Rockets of the AHL. Yeah, you just lost maybe some of your 4th line, maybe some of your 3rd line of the Tampa Bay Lightning, but I think, again, you don't have Steven Stamkos anymore, and how long are we gonna see Andrei Vasilevsky in net for the Lightning too? So, I think what we just saw from Tampa Bay in the 1st round against the Panthers, I think that was the last time we saw the best of Tampa until they're done their rebuilding, whenever that's gonna be. But yeah, I think after that, that's pretty much all we're gonna see from the Tampa Bay Lightning. So it was a good run. I enjoyed seeing Tampa Bay's Stanley Cup runs, but again, I just don't know if Tampa has much left in the tank for another playoff run. Toronto, so they man, these Leafs, man, I don't get it. I really don't get the Leafs, man. This is why I'm not a Leaf fan, just because they don't seem to know what they're doing. Leaf fans seem to know what they're doing. I don't know what they seem to be doing. Okay, so you just signed Matthew Nyes to a 6-year contract. 6 years, eh? I mean, he's good. He's a good player. I don't know if you wanted to sign him 6 years, maybe 4, 3 at the minimum, 4 at the max. I don't know about 6 years. So anyways, they re-signed him. You got rid of Mitch Marner, so Mitch Marner is now part of the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, it's a great move. Vegas made an exceptional move. You just got Nicholas Roy from Vegas, and then you get rid of Marner. If the Leafs are gonna be playoff contention, then don't be right after you get eliminated saying, "Oh, we're gonna trade Easton Cowan. He's the best London Knight player that has been drafted to a Leafs organization ever since Mitch Marner played for the London Knights." And now you're thinking about trading him? Not to mention you just traded one of your best players to Vegas. Not only did Mitch Marner want to go to Vegas, but he also was one of your best players, and now you just traded. Now you still have your 2nd/3rd best player on your team, aka Matthews and Nylander. Alex Steves signed with Boston. Um, Nicholas Robinson, Alex Nylander, Max Pacioretty, a lot of these players. Matt Murray, he just went to Seattle, as we mentioned. So I don't know if the Leafs still know what they're doing, but you kind of have to take this one step at a time and think, okay, if you're getting rid of Marner, who's your next player you're getting rid of? Are you getting rid of the most overrated captain in Leafs history in Austin Matthews? Or are you getting rid of Nylander, who they've been talking about and settling on for the year and like every other year they seem to be on Nylander. Yeah, I think that was a good move. And I mean, it's Vegas, right? Who doesn't want to go to Vegas? I think there was only one time in their 7 or 8 year history for the Vegas Golden Knights that they didn't make the playoffs. And that was only one season. I mean, obviously, trading him was something you needed to do. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see who fills his spot over time. I think it's gonna be Easton Cowan if the Leafs don't trade him. That would be yeah. But yeah, I think it would be Easton Cowan. If not him, then they gotta find somebody to kind of replace him and then build along the way. Like, okay, if they don't do it again, if they don't make the playoffs again, or they don't if they repeat what they just did in the past 7 years again, then you trade Nylanders or you trade Matthews. It's interesting how they signed Tavares though. I'm surprised that they signed John Tavares what was it, like a 6-year contract or something? I'm wondering if the Leafs are gonna go after someone like Brock Besser. Now Brock Besser, I thought they were going to go after him, Brock Besser for Vancouver. I really thought he would have been the guy, but I mean, he's just signed with Vancouver for 7 years, so there's no way you're going to get him now. But I think that was maybe if I don't know if the Leafs were saw the situation of Brock Besser, because I even think like Elias Pettersson, he's also due to I don't know if he what his contract situation is, but maybe you take him up in the future. I don't know. But anyways, I think that's a good move. Just to see. I'm just curious to know who's gonna fill Marner's spot now. Utah. So obviously we know that Utah has just rebranded to the Utah Mammoth, which I'm happy to see that. Yamamoto, they signed him to a 1-year contract. Nate Schmidt, now he's obviously the former Winnipeg Jet, and Chris Tanev. So they signed both of those former Winnipeg Jets. Or am I thinking of the other Tanev? Is it the Seattle guy? I don't know. Oh no, it is the Winnipeg guy. So the two Winnipeg guys, Schmidt and Tanev. So they signed each of them to 3-year contracts. And then Vanecek, because he's a former Buffalo Sabre, so he just signed a 1-year contract with Utah as well. Nick Bustad, they lost him to St. Louis, but that was the only guy. So good on Utah for that. At least they didn't make a Seattle mistake of signing Matt Murray. Oh goodness. Restricted free agent. Okay, so Jack McBain, so he's another guy too. And now that they've rebranded to the Mammoth, I think this is going to be a good run for this team, this club, because ever since they moved from Arizona, I think like everyone's been saying, "Oh, Arizona's going to come back to the NHL." Yeah, maybe, but I think we're going to see teams in the league before Arizona. Like they already had their shots, you know. Sure, this guy has like 5, 10 years to build a new state-of-the-art facility arena, but I don't think Arizona is going to hit the market for a new expansion team again until teams like Houston or maybe even Atlanta end up with teams. Obviously, there's other teams like I think New Orleans, Quebec City is obviously another one, and is Kansas another one? I don't know. But anyways, it's good that they brought a team to Utah. I saw that right after Utah finished their season, they just started, renovations on Delta Center. So they're way on their way to having a good franchise there in Utah. So yeah, Vancouver obviously they signed Brock Besser to 7 years, 7-year contract, and it was good. I'm glad they kept him around. And Philip Di Giuseppe, he signed with Winnipeg. Noah Juleson, he signed with Philadelphia. You got some good players, but you also released the ones that you needed to do. And I'm glad to see that Brock Besser has stayed. I think the goaltending situation for Vancouver is going to be quite interesting. I think you're going to have to see like, okay, you have Thatcher Demko, but what happens if he, reaches his prime? Who is going to fill that spot? And so I think Vancouver kind of has to work around that and see what other goaltending possibilities and options that are around there for the Canucks. And yeah, now that you have Brock Besser, I think you got to really focus on the contract situation for Elias Pettersson going forward, and hope that you keep him around. If you don't keep him around, maybe there's someone out in the market that you can hopefully work with and hopefully see that they're available. If you decide to trade him, put him up at the trade deadline. I don't know, but I think Vancouver's in a good position. They faced Edmonton in the second round 2 years ago, and they just missed the playoffs this past year. So Vancouver, you got nothing to worry about. I think you're in a good place. I think you probably just might want to keep an open look for goaltenders going forward, in my opinion. Yes, the classic Vegas Golden Knights. So obviously Vegas, they just got Mitch Marner. Quite the contract for him, but yeah, Mitch Marner, he's obviously a big part of the Knights organization now. Yeah, they signed Reinhardt, Colahan. They're all part of the Knights organization now too. Tanner Pearson, though, he is someone that played on Vegas, but he's now signed with the Winnipeg Jets, obviously former Vancouver Canuck. Brandon Saad, former Chicago Blackhawk, so he's now re-signed with Vegas. Ilya Samsonov, I'm glad to see him re-signing for Vegas, as well as Riley Smith. Ilya Samsonov, I think well, yeah, obviously he's former Leaf goaltender, but I think that's someone that maybe the Leafs maybe wanted to hold on to. I don't know. That's a question for Leaf fans. I don't know. Was it a good idea to give up Ilya Samsonov? But I'm glad to see that Vegas is building for the future. Yeah, Ilya Samsonov is a good goaltender. It's interesting how Vegas went upon their expansion draft, but how they got every single like good player, right? Because they have the money, right? And where Seattle was like, oh yeah, we'll just take this guy and this guy and this guy, and then they're getting to playoff contention. But anyways, it's good to see Ilya Samsonov as a re-signing with Vegas, and we'll see what happens going forward in the future. Yeah, we got two more teams here to cover. So Washington, they've obviously signed Anthony Beauvillier to a two-year contract with the Capitals, and obviously unrestricted free agents Nicholas Backstrom, Ethan Bear, former Edmonton Oiler. They both signed with the New York Islanders, so good team players to have on to additions to the New York Islanders, because I'm glad to see them building up, around Matthew Schaefer a little bit, because it's good, because it's just crazy to think that the New York Islanders didn't even have a glimpse of what they were actually expecting to have the first overall pick. And then they all of a sudden got Matthew Schaefer, and it was just like crazy. And then they said, and so I'm glad to see Anthony Beauvillier re-signing with Washington. But they do lose Backstrom, a big part of Washington's history. Ethan Bear, former Edmonton Oiler. Lars Eller, former Montreal Canadian. So he just signed with Ottawa. So Lars Eller is going back up to Canada. Andrew Mangiapane, so former Calgary Flame, former now Washington Capital. So he's just signed with Edmonton. TJ Oshie's retired. And Hunter Shepard, he just signed with Ottawa. So you're in your Ovechkin era right now. You just had one of the biggest seasons of Ovechkin's career. You're losing some, but you're gaining some. And I think that's a positive for Washington. The fact that they knocked out Montreal in the first round, and they went to face Carolina. So the fact that they were able to still make it to the second round, it's a good sign. They still got a lot in them. And I think Washington, you're going to see them in the playoffs again, regardless. Because again, Washington and Winnipeg were the two teams that clinched top of the league last year. Winnipeg Jets. So Tanner Pearson, he signed a 1-year contract with the Jets. And Nyquist, he signed 1-year contract as well. Mason Appleton, he signed with Detroit. I find Mason Appleton, he was like a big part of the Winnipeg Jets. Like, I think he was actually part of Winnipeg since Winnipeg actually came to the NHL, since they got a team again. But it's sad to see Mason Appleton leave Winnipeg, but it's good to see him moving on to Detroit. Chris Driedger, we signed in Russia. Nikolai Ehlers, he signed with Carolina. Brandon Tanev signed with Utah. I think the biggest surprise team for me was the New York Islanders, especially how fast they were able to gain a lot of individuals after unexpectedly getting the first overall draft pick with Matthew Schaefer. Los Angeles, that's another team you're going to want to watch out for closely this season. And I mean, I don't really see Detroit or Nashville or Philadelphia being those big playoff contention teams, but those are three teams in particular you might going to want to keep a close eye out for in the future, just because they've built some pretty good talent. They're not hanging on to their past. And I think it's going to be pretty cool to see where some of these teams go coming into this new season, and what we're going to expect going into the fall. So thanks everyone for your support. Thank you for tuning into this live stream, and enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you again soon.